Okay, so in our last video, I discussed the possibility of doing a big refactor. So I went through some documentation and looked on online forums and whatnot. And it seems like in Python 3.10, I am not going to be able to do what I used to do with this PyTest env thing, passing that into my, I guess, my test folder, which is completely separate. It's kind of a hacky way. PyTest was kind of designed to actually be with all the same within the same folder scope. So what we're gonna do is actually do a big refactor and engineer this a different way, which is always fun and a part of the job. So we're going to, rather than passing in those global variables or those PyTest variables, if you will, we're going to add two more environment.json values. And those values will be like, do you want to copy or move? So we'll just call it like a move property or something like that. And then another property that has a list of all the folders and the files, if you want to do specific files of what you want to copy over. And then that's going to put it in a specific test execution folder on the framework. And once it's done, it's going to delete that. So I think this is the best route to do with it, or to go with this, because I couldn't get anything else to work. So we will do with what we got. So this is a great learning experience and great practice, because this will happen on the job all the time. So let's go ahead and start refactoring. I'm going to start with the conf test file, just because it's a little bit easier and it's already up. So what we're going to do is we're going to wipe this out. We do not need that anymore. We are going to then again wipe all of this out. This will not exist anymore. And you'll see what we're going to do with this. We're going to do that one thing I was talking about where we can pass in methods to the actual tests. So we got that done. Now what we're going to do is replace those. So we'll make a fixture for the environment configurations. Hopefully I spelled that right. We're going to do a @pytest.fixture, and the scope of this fixture will be lasting for the entire session. Okay, and we're going to call this just, how about env config? Keep it simple. And so rather than taking in config now, we're going to do something, a PyTest property called PyTest config, which allows us to access like the command line arguments that we pass in. So we're going to be taking that in, and we're going to be pretty much doing the same thing here. We're going to be returning our configure env, passing in the PyTest config. And so now we're going to have to go down here, change this just a little bit. So rather than config.option.env, it's going to be PyTest config. Get rid of that. Dot get option, and it's going to be a method now. So this is a string, and there's the method. So now it's PyTest config get option method with whatever parameter you're trying to get. So let's go ahead and do that for all of these. Very exciting, I know, but we will get through this. Let's do this one. Client secret. Okay. And then last but not least, our base URL. Speaking of our base URL, we're going to make some changes to that as well. Let's go ahead and do that. Copy this again. And boom. Done. So that part is done. So we've got our first fixture done here. Let's go to our second fixture now. Our second fixture is going to be the auth token one. So we'll just do fixture for auth token. And so this will just be called auth token. And we're going to take in with this an env config. So we're going to take in this. And once we have that, we're going to return basically exactly what we had before. So I could have probably kept that up, but we'll just go ahead and do this. Get auth token. We got env config now at client ID, env config at client secret, and then env config at base URL. Should be good. And while we're on this base URL, let's go fix that one thing I was talking about. So I actually already made the change here. So let me go back. So all we're going to do is we're going to remove this HTTP call here, or this HTTP prepend. And just keep it base URL and then /user /login. And then on our environment, we're just going to actually append whether it's HTTP or HTTPS. It can keep it simpler. So like when you pass in your command line arguments, it just makes it simpler. So that's going to be our new base URL. Just make sure you have the HTTP // or HTTPS if your app is already authenticated with HTTPS. So now that we got that, this is done. Now we need to finish up our last one, which was, what was that one? That was our runtime tools. We're still going to need that. Fixture for runtime tools. And you know what? We totally forgot the fixture up here. So let's go ahead and copy that here. Put that here. These are all going to be session based. Def runtime tools. Oops. This isn't going to take in anything. All it's going to do is return a instance of runtime tools. Wow, really cannot spell today. Done, just like that. So we are no longer going to need traceback here. We can get rid of this import. Fix this. There we go. So we've got our refactor here, and I'm just double checking. So I need to make sure that everything on here is replaced. So this is no longer going to be pytest env. This is going to be env config. So we need to actually do this here. Env config equals configure env. So we're basically going to be writing to this twice. And it's going to be the config. There we go. I might even skip this flag. I'm going to do some more research on that. We might skip, like put a flag for configure env to skip actually writing to the file. So we'll see. That might be completely unnecessary. We might just keep this as is for now. But anyways, so now we need to change this to env config at env. Oops. And let's just do a quick check here. So we'll do pytest dot fixture. I think we have gotten rid of all of our pytest global variables. All right, let's call that good. So this file should be good to go. Might have an extra quality of life here in the future. We'll see if it's even worth the hassle or not. So let's go on to our next file, which is going to be our test health check file that we made in, our Region IQ app. So let me go ahead and do this real quick. Okay, so this is what we should have. We should have API test, our test health check.py, and then our test health check method. So what we're going to change here is actually a couple things. We're going to remove this. Don't need that anymore. Actually, just kidding. We do need that for our pytest marking. My bad. We do still need that. We're going to change this to now take in our env config. You can kind of see how this is all wrapping up here. Our auth token and our runtime tools. Fixtures that we define in our conf test. And so now all we're going to do is change from our pytest env. Now it's going to be env config. And we don't necessarily need runtime tools for this because we're not actually going to do anything with it. So we can go ahead and just remove that one. And then we're just going to take in auth token. And we're done with that. So that should be our basic refactor in terms of setting up for our local running execution. The next thing we're going to need to do here is actually write the code for moving, or I guess for the two new environment variables, and then moving or copying those files over to our directory for where our conf test is living. So let me go ahead and switch back over. Okay, so let's go ahead and add those two variables real quick, or those properties. Let's just call this test list. It's going to be an empty list for now because we don't have anything yet. Transfer method sounds a little bit better. Let's do that one. Transfer method. And so I'm thinking, like, if you're running this in a pipeline, you're just going to want to move it. I mean, just to save up your disk space. I don't see any harm in that. But for like a local environment, maybe like we can do copy instead. And so what I'm thinking that our method will do is if you do the move method at the end of the test, it's going to move it back to its original spot. And the copy method is just going to delete the entire folder. I think that's how we're going to do it, but that might be way too complicated for this. We'll see what happens. So by default, I'm just going to have this set to copy for now. So let's actually go back here. And I'm thinking for this, since this is only ran one time at the beginning and this value is cached, let's put this code so we actually don't even need to do this twice. Let's put this code in here. And we need config though. Let's see, is this gonna work? I'm not sure if this will work. Maybe it will. Let's see. We'll play around with this. Okay. We'll see if that works or not. Not 100% sure, but we might have to put it back, but if I could keep it like that, that'd be great. So there we go. We've got that, and now we need to remove that. We don't need that anymore. We need to add our options here. So parser, add option. This is going to be test list. And our destination will be the same. I'm not going to make this required, and the only reason is in case like you're running this locally, and let's say you don't even want to do this copy method or whatever. If this is empty, then I'm just going to assume that you're going to be running this all your tests within this folder. So it just gives you that option. So we've got test list. And the same thing with transfer method, they go hand in hand together. So we're just going to store that, and that's not going to be required either. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. If pytest get option test list, env at test list. Let me make sure here. See, this might be a little different since this is an actual list. We definitely don't need this. We'll play around with this too when we're testing. And then we're gonna need this one, the transfer method. Might as well lowercase it, doesn't really matter. Transfer method. Okay. We should be set up with this new stuff now. So our next challenge here, which I'm going to be thinking of for just a little bit, is how we're going to write our move or our transfer method code. How that's going to work, and then the deletion. I'm going to have to double check the docs to see what the pytest like closure method is. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to check that real quick. So I'll be back in just a few. Actually, while I was looking at the code, there's one thing we do need to do here, and that is actually add some validation to this. This can only be move or copy. So in that case, we need to have another check here. If, in this case, it's going to be env at transfer method does not, actually, Yeah, if env transfer method does not equal copy and env at transfer method does not equal move, then we're going to raise an exception, and that exception will say transfer method invalid, can only be move or copy. And let's actually just keep this right here and keep this consistent too. This should be a single quote, copy. And one more thing here. Actually, this is going to be down here after this block. So env transfer method equals, we'll just call this transfer method as the variable. Change some of this. Okay. That should be good. Let me just double check our work here. If PyTest get option transfer method is not none, then our transfer method is equal to the option for transfer method lower. If the transfer method does not equal move and it does not equal copy, then we know it's not one of these two. So we have to raise an exception saying transfer method invalid, it can only be move or copy. Perfect. Okay, now let's get to the transfer method code. And I think for that, I might make another video after. I am going to make another video after this, just because this one's already really long. And yeah, so let's go ahead and end this here, and then next video we'll build out that new code.